Good afternoon. I am going to give it a few minutes as I always do. I see a thumbs up, so someone is here. Thank you for being here. I am giving it a few minutes to give others a chance to join. Hi, Sandra. Welcome. Happy Sunday. I'm glad you're here. Good day. Glad you're here. Welcome. All right. I am going to give it a couple more minutes and y'all can see me struggle trying to adjust my chair. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. All right. I'll give it one more minute and then I'll get started. Do my intro. Good morning from Southern California. Good morning. Good afternoon. All right. Let me get it started and then um, we can get into some conversation. So, good morning, good afternoon, depending on your location. My name is Jewel Pearson. Let me change my slide so I can do this the right way. And this is Miss Bohemian Soul TV. And this segment that we're about to kick off is Creating Home, a tiny house series. And this will be a modified version of our conversations on intimate spaces. Every Sunday, I do offer live content and alternate between these conversations and then the What's Your Question segment, where I answer frequently asked tiny house questions. When I introduce myself, I say I built a kind of fancy tiny house in 2015, and since that time I have shared my journey to hopefully inspire others who are interested in the movement. I do also offer coaching and consultations to help others in their journey, and you will be able to find the links to schedule with me in the video description once this goes live. And as I'm doing all of that, I try to serve up a lot of representation in the movement because I want us to see ourselves in this movement. It is my intent to build figurative and literal community that is inclusive and accessible. And I hope, as always, that if you find this information in the video helpful, you'll share it, you'll like it, and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to turn on the notifications so that you'll know when content is live. All right. Thank you all very much for being here. As I just mentioned, this is going to be a modified version of the conversations that we normally have. My guest this morning is ill, and so we had to cancel at the last minute. And we will schedule again. Vaughn, she's a repeat guest. She was on the second session in the series talking about Vaughn and Jay, and they shared with us van life. And Vaughn has created a she shed in the backyard, and we wanted to. I was going to connect with her to talk about that and the journey And we'll do that at a later time. So right now, I'm just hoping she'll be feeling better soon. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Glad to have you. So I figured since I didn't want to cancel, um, I figured I'd kind of talk through my own personal journey. I don't think I've ever, well, in the What's Your Question segment, I share about my home, but I figured I'd interview myself in an abridged type interview and share my journey from the beginning, and hopefully we'll figure this out and it'll work and make sense to someone and help somebody in their journey, as I share how I got started in the journey. So if I try to go through the questions, my interview questions, I usually have my guest introduce themselves, and as I've done that already, I think most of you all know my background as to how I got involved in this movement. Um, Living a lighter lifestyle was something that I had envisioned doing as a very young single mom. Um, and I've always shared that, and anybody that's a mom and a single mom, that's hard. And I just knew at some point I wanted to live a lighter lifestyle. I always felt I just really wanted the opportunity to be irresponsible versus having to have been so responsible as a single mom. And okay, we'll chat about that. Um, as my daughter was growing up, I envisioned it living in an RV, and I just really wanted to travel in an RV. And I actually started conversations with her as she was headed to kindergarten, because the my plan was that she was gonna make it and buy her mother an RV. So as she was headed off into life, she would have made it and used her um, funding to buy my RV, and it didn't quite work out that way. But um, she's grown, and as she was headed into undergrad in 2005 is when I really started getting serious about what the next steps were for me and what my vision looked like for myself. And um, I, again, was still focused on RVs at the time. I actually had started going to like RV shows. And I realized the RVs that I liked were really, really pricey. Um, but I still was like trying to figure out what that looked like. When she went to undergrad the following year, I actually sold the house that we lived in, which was in um, outside of Atlanta, and she had grown up. We lived in a 4 bedroom, 3 bath house, and so I sold that house, and kind of from that point forward, decided I wasn't going to buy another house. Like I knew going through the process of selling my home, I didn't want to be that committed to a home for the future, because I knew I had a bigger plan, so a bigger vision. So from that point forward, I rented. And again, I think I've said multiple times, I don't have anything against home ownership. I just knew my go forward plan was going to be different. And I wanted to have the ability there. It's a lot easier to get out of a lease than it is to sell a home. The expense is different, the process is different, the timeline is different. And so I knew I wanted the flexibility of leasing or renting versus home ownership. And that's what I did. And I kind of staggered going from a 4 bedroom, 3 bath. The first place I rented long term after that was 3 bedrooms and 2.5 baths, 3 baths, 2.5 baths. But over the course of 10 years before I really built my house is when um, good morning, is when I really started the downsizing. So over the course of 10 years, I downsized from that 4 bedroom, 3 bath home to a 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartment. And that's what I lived in prior to um, starting my tiny house build. And it was before I started the build. late 2014, and I had stumbled on tiny houses 2012ish, and that is when I decided, kind of pivoted from the RV to deciding I was building a tiny house. And so my plan was, and tiny houses were very different at that time. The process for tiny houses, information for tiny houses, funding for tiny houses, was very different. There wasn't a lot of information available out on the internet like there is now. There were a handful of people who lived in tiny houses. Like, the community was so small, you really kind of knew everybody and you knew their house. And so the research process, I researched for a year and a half, almost 2 years, gathering information, deciding, what size house I was going to build. And it wasn't the opportunity like that it is now to actually go visit tiny houses. Like, you can go to a tiny house festival and actually visit tiny houses. That didn't exist at that point. There was one couple who was in Nashville, and they had an open house. They had a tiny house in their backyard, and they offered an open house, and that was like the only opportunity that I got to actually visit a tiny house, and that is what helped me decide. Their home was a 24-foot, and I decided at that point, after getting to visit their house, that I was going to build a 28-foot home, because I realized I wanted a little bit more space for the bathroom. Um, but yeah, that's kind of how I got started in the journey. Um, and y'all feel free to ask me questions in the chat, about my journey. I think I'm gonna share, um, let's see if I can get that off. I'll share some pictures of, I don't think that's the right picture. So y'all have to bear with me, because this was last minute when I got this together. Um, okay, so um, starting as I started planning for my tiny house, I actually started planning, and I started out with a sketch on graph paper. And I always recommend that to people who don't have design background. I don't have a design background. I don't have um, uh, architecture background. None of that. But graph paper, because it's got those nice little squares, gives you the opportunity to draw to scale, as you know, in a common type way each. So as I sketched out my house, knowing that I was planning to build a 28-foot house, um, each of the blocks on that graph paper represented a foot. So I sketched it out 28 feet wide, and sketched it out almost nine. It's 8'6". No, I'm sorry, 28 feet long and 8'6" wide. So I sketched it out from that point on, perspective on graph paper. One of the things that I had done that was very helpful to me is, when I got to that, when at I was living, like I said, in a 1 bedroom, 1 bath tiny house. And as I made the decision that I was building a 28-foot tiny house, I actually measured my apartment, so getting the length of 28 feet within my apartment. And then I identified what the width was, 8'6", in my apartment. So I didn't actually tape it off, but I had kind of made a rectangle in my tiny house to identify 28 by 8'6" wide in my apartment. And what that helped me figure out was how I would be able to navigate that space. So in my apartment, in that 28 feet, I had my kitchen represented. I had some open seating space represented. And then I knew my bedrooms were going to be overhead. So, because in the apartment, my bedroom was outside the 28 feet, as was my outside the width of it. So the bedroom and the bathroom were outside of that. But I also knew, okay, bedroom is outside of this 28 by 8.6, but I knew my bedrooms were going to be overhead. And then within that 28 feet, I'd also accounted for the bathroom that wasn't in the space in my apartment. And so that really helped me understand like functioning in that space, because my apartment outside of the little balcony that was on my apartment was just about 28 feet long, maybe give or take a few feet, 5 feet in the apartment, and then the balcony. And so that really, I think, solidified for me that I could operate in that type of a space without having had the luxury of, visiting a 28-foot long tiny house. Again, they didn't exist at that. They weren't the option to visit homes. And so when I tell people making sure that you accommodate, you're building your tiny house for you, making sure that you understand how you use the space in your home and what you're doing in your home, and understanding within the confines of the size home that you plan to build, ensuring that you've got everything accounted for within that space, and taping off a space is an excellent way to get an idea of what that actually is going to look and feel like. And so my once I put it to graph paper, my sister is an interior designer and she was familiar with CAD, so she took my build from graph paper to actual design software, CAD software. And then she had a colleague who helped me with the build, and the colleague then took it from CAD to SketchUp. And what you see here is SketchUp. And so that is, both of these pictures were pictures that were developed for my tiny house before we actually even started building. And again, this was from graph paper to CAD to SketchUp. And I have always said that I actually lived in my house before my house was actually built, because I have these pictures. I have the interior of the house. And if you know what my house looked like, and I'll show you in just a few minutes, this was the exact replica of, or the exact design that we built to. And even down to the material. The back of my house is this red metal. That's my big window, round window. This is my house. And this, again, was what we had before I even started building. And my comment that I would say I would make was that if my house had differed any from the building plans that I had, I would have been so disappointed, because it was like I had already lived in my tiny house. If I had been thinking, I would have shown some more of the SketchUp to show you the interior of my house. But we had totally captured the build, and it was just a matter now of getting from this SketchUp to an actual build. And so, welcome, Angela. Happy to have you here. Um, and so, this was SketchUp prior to building. This was the actual start of the build. Underneath that plastic is my trailer. I purchased my trailer. I picked it up and brought it to the site, and then the build got started a few months later. The place that we were building was the side of a storage building. So this storage building had, I guess, like an area where, I guess the building, I don't know what the building had been before, but like it was an area where trucks could pull up, a loading dock. and this loading dock was covered on three sides, as you can see. And I knew that part of my build was going to be during the winter, and so I rented this space so that my build could continue. And so I rented this space as well as like a small unit within the building so that I could store materials. This was important, and I talk about this like timeline, understanding your timeline. If you are on a a, a, a fixed timeline, an expedited timeline, like I was, you want to be able to, and you know that you'll be building during extreme weather. You'll want to take that into consideration. And so this was an added expense, obviously, because I've got to pay for this, and this is coming out of my funds for my tiny house build. So you need to factor that into your budget. It's also critical if you're building and getting to wrapped or dried in when you're building. So you've got your build happening, and let me see if I have a picture of it. Let me go back. So if you've got your build going, and this is, you've got to framing like this. If for any reason, say your build gets stalled and you're just building outside in the elements, and the build has to sit for a while, and rain is happening, snow is happening, whatever, whatever is happening, and the framing is just sitting. If you haven't gotten to the point where it is wrapped, and I don't think I included a picture of the exterior house wrapped. No, I didn't. Um, your house sitting just like that, you'll end up losing all of this work because that wood can't be exposed for a long time to the elements. And I'm sure there's some professional language that I should be using that I don't know. But this again is why it's important for you to take into account your timeline and location that you're building so that you can protect your build. And so the build progressed. Let me look and see if I have some specific questions. I do see these questions. I'll come back to them in just a few minutes. Um, but anyway, so this was the build as it was progressing. This was the interior as it was happening. For those of you who know my house, this was the beginning of my closet. As I designed my house, there was, as I talk about the things that you identify as your building, your must-haves, your nice-to-haves, and your wish list. On my must-have list, I had to have a closet. I had to have a lot of windows. In the windows for me, I needed them all around because I didn't know exactly where I would place my house, and I wanted to have light to come in, from all angles. And then I wanted to have a nice sized bathroom. So this was the beginning of my closet. One of the things that I'll point out here is because we were in a tiny house, obviously you are concerned about space. So and you're building within inches. And so I did not use walls. So you'll notice this is cabinet grade plywood that are the walls for my closet versus using actual framing to make walls, and that you might sheetrock or a panel or something like that, because the using this cabinet grade plywood allowed me to have to account for less space. And so that was why I decided to go that route. I sourced all of the materials for my build, very involved in my build because one, it was my baby. I started from graph paper, sourced all of the material. I can tell you my house, I actually insulated the trailer, the foundation of the house. I did the insulation for that myself because I wanted to ensure, that's one of the things that if you don't see it happen, you don't know how it's done. And I wanted to do that myself. Um, this is the interior of my closet. So I used a lot of piping, and this was as we were getting started doing the interior of the closet, but before these pieces got spray painted. And then this is, as the build is happening, This for me, this was my first screened-in porch, and I had the screened-in porch and the Juliet balcony overhead. That was on my wish list item, and it was one of the things that I was able to accomplish. And so, this Juliet balcony was off of my master loft. One of the things that I always speak to in building is tiny houses don't necessarily follow exact building code for conventional houses, but one of the things that you should be doing. So this window here in my loft is an egress window, meaning should there be an emergency, fire or something like that in the house, I could physically get out of this window. And my other window on the other side of the the loft on the other side of the house is also an egress window for safety measures, just common sense. And so to get to that balcony, I would exit out of the window and I could access that balcony. And then that screened in porch folded up for travel. The steps here, I always talk about my steps. This was like a main point of my build. I didn't want to use a lot of times tiny houses will use the steps that have built-in cabinetry. I did not want to do that. I wanted a floating staircase, and that was an important part of the build for me. Turned out fabulously. Inside that wall, back behind this, where you see like the long black framing, I guess you could call it, of these stairs. There's a piece inside that wall that kind of matches that, but is a lot thicker, and that is to ensure that the framing was structurally sound, and it was a big part of the build. And I worked with a fabulous vendor to do that. And then we were close to finish. I realized I wanted to try out again. There was not a lot of opportunity to see how things worked on different houses, and so um, because there weren't a lot of tiny houses that you could take lessons learned from. But I decided that I wanted to. So this is cedar on the front of my house, but the back and cedar, it was very expensive. And then I decided on that I wanted to use metal and incorporate metal in the house. And so the back of my house is metal, like the roofing metal. It is the same type of metal that I used on the roof. And then I decided that I wanted to use that on the back of the house. And I love it. It turned out really well. And then to add some color to the front of the house, I had um, the metal used here to frame the windows. I think, and that was a lot less expensive than the cedar, using the cost of the cedar. And I think now, if I had known how well it was going to turn out, and there are a lot of tiny houses that are built that way now, but I think if I had known at the time how well it would have um, turned out, I might have done the entire house in metal because there was a lot of cost savings there. And this was the first time the tiny house was on the move. And by this time, I was involved with HGTV. So this was actually a day of filming, and we were moving the tiny house from this location to my first location, which was an RV park. And I got HGTV was kind to me because I cried like a baby, because that was the first time my house was moving, and I think I was terrified. I know I don't think I was terrified. I was actually terrified. But it has moved quite a few times since then and has been just fine. But it was nerve wracking for sure. Okay, let me stop and see if there's some questions I can answer right now. Question: when you first started, did you consider getting an RV? If so, why did you choose the tiny home? I'm afraid of not having a place to park it legally, or did you buy land first? So my my initial thoughts were around RVs. The RVs that I like are like the big motor coaches, which were out of my budget. When I stumbled, the ones that I liked really weren't within budget. I don't RVs are less for full time than, so my tiny house, as you can see, is stick built, wood built. RVs, you'll know, like the snowbirds, the people who live in RVs full time, they migrate to warm areas during the winter because RVs structurally aren't built for full time living in all types of weather conditions. And so when I stumbled on a tiny house story back then, I decided that I was going to pivot to building a tiny house because of it being stick built as well as being mobile. To me, it represents more of a home than an RV does. Like, I can hang up my art. It represents a house for me, just on a smaller scale. So those are, excuse me, the reasons that I decided to build a tiny home. I did not buy land first because most places, especially in the West, a lot of places, especially on the West Coast, do not allow you to place a tiny house on wheels solely on a piece of land. And so even buying land would not have been an option. Um, I one of there are a couple of what's your question series that I've done where I talk about placing places to find parking for a tiny house. I do understand the fear of not having a place to park it legally. I always say, unless you're on the West Coast where tiny houses are a lot more accepted, um, I say that tiny house living on wheels isn't for the faint of heart because it is the unknown of where you'll place your house. There is the potential that you would have to move it, and I've had to go through that. So that is, a risk that you'd have to be willing to take, and again, it's not for everybody. I do say that, success. I've been able to live in my home successfully for 8 years, but I do recognize I'm built a little bit different, and I recognize that there is a lot of risk in it. So that's the best answer I can give you. Um, Now the option that there are tiny house communities is an option for you if you want to ensure that you can do it legally. Having the conversation with your local people, because those rules are made at the local level, not at the state level. And again, the West Coast does it well. But I'll link. Let me make a note. I'll link to my um, tiny house parking videos in the description where I go into that in depth, so you can um, follow up on that information. Let's see. How much was the total cost from build to finish? So I kind of had stopped counting because it got to be very stressful. Because again, this was me building in 2014. I did not have a lot to compare to, and I knew nothing about building at that time. And so I had compared what I was building to another tiny house that was kind of luxury at the time. That people in the movement at that time were not building large homes, and they were not building luxury homes. And so I was kind of guesstimating, and I had doubled what I knew that person had spent for their tiny house. And so I was expecting that my tiny home was going to be, again, this was me guessing, expecting that my tiny house was going to cost around $40,000. But what I hadn't factored in was that that person had built their home themselves, which was saving on all of the labor. They also lived in a different part of the country, which impacts access your costs for materials. Depending on where you live, materials cost differently. They also built their home over, I think it was more than a year. And so that's going to factor in on the timeline and the cost. And so their build was completely and comparing my cost was completely apples to orange and totally not the way that it should be done. What my house ended up costing out of my pocket was probably about $85,000. And I had savings. I borrowed from my 401k. I took out a loan. I maxed out credit cards. As I got closer to the end, I had some friends who loaned me some money that I paid back after my build was completed because I was so close and they just would not let me fail because at that point I was done and tired. Um, I did have I did work with some sponsors on some of the materials, like I mentioned about the staircase, and so some of my materials were donated or reduced costs, but out of pocket, I spent about $85,000. And I do talk about sponsors if somebody's interested in trying to figure out how to get sponsors for your build. I have talked about sponsors. I'll link to that video as well. Let me see if some more questions. Are you still planning on using your trailer to travel and taking your business on the road with, I think, consultations at the customer's location, so to speak? No. So before I built my house, I initially thought I would travel with my house um, a lot more, but I really had no concept what 28 foot long house was, the massiveness of a 28-foot house. And I always say if you plan to move a lot with your home, I would not recommend building over 20 feet. 18 feet is going to be more comfortable. So my house is not, wouldn't, I would not recommend trying to move a 28-foot home frequently. And then my where my home is located now, I've actually added this sunroom space, and I've got a porch on it that both are on piers or on foundation that are attached to the house. And so when I built that part of it, I decided I was not moving. I'm not moving my home again unless for some unforeseen reason I am required to. But I have no intentions of moving my house again. And I'm kind of particular about my house, so I wouldn't do consultations at customer location. I used to offer tours, but I don't anymore. Um, Physical tours. That wouldn't be There is something different to me about having people in and out of your home, so I wouldn't do that. Let's see if there's another question. Who helped? Oh, thank you, Sandra. Who helped with the design of your original enclosed porch? I um, I decided what I wanted and consulted with um, a local guy, not the guy who was working on my tiny house build. There was another guy who worked with um, porches. That was his specialty, porches and balconies, and so I kind of designed it, and he and I worked together to determine what that part of the build would look like. Let's see. What is the process when you move the house? I love to travel, and although I understand you shouldn't move it as much as an RV, I'd like to move it at least 3 times a year. I actually have I think that was my last What's Your Question video where I talk through the process of moving a tiny house and the things that I go through to get my house ready to move. So I will add that link in the video as well, and it answers your question in detail. Uh, Hey there. And that was at a time when it was harder to, oh, absolutely. When it was harder to get sponsors for a tiny house. Yeah, that's when people were looking at me like I have four heads. Because I was talking about I'm building a tiny house on wheels and blah, blah, blah. And no one was really understanding. I won't even go into that story. Um, it, that's okay. Um, but yes, it was very difficult to get sponsors because no one really understood tiny houses on wheels at that time. No one understood what I was doing. I actually reached out to 84 Lumber because I was building close by them. And I had 3 meetings with them to see if I could get them to be sponsors for my build. And it didn't go far at all. So a couple of years later, when they got into the tiny house building arena, I really was disgusted with them because they could have been at the forefront of tiny houses if they had just been open to thinking outside of the box a couple of years earlier. Let's see. Here's a question. Do you know if a tiny house on wheels has ever been converted or moved from trailer to a foundation, like an ADU, added dwelling unit? Um, Not moving from the trailer because you're actually building on the trailer. Um, if it is, um, no, if you're building on, so let's go back and see if I can show you a picture. Do I have a picture? So the way my house is built in the on the trailer, around the bottom of this is the framing that is attached to the trailer. And so there is a lot of structural integrity, because I don't know the names of all of the things, but bolts, and I don't want you to think of small screws. There's some fasteners. If you look right here, you see these the fasteners here, and these fasteners are very expensive. Um, there's a lot that goes into building a tiny house on wheels into that trailer. And so undoing all of that um, is not possible if you're because you this is the key part of building your tiny house on wheels, because when this is moving down the road, you want to ensure that this is not going to come off of this trailer, and so it's not built on top of the trailer, it is built within the trailer, and you're using a lot of fasteners and things. That's a professional word, to build that house into the trailer, because you don't want it to come apart. And so, unless you're doing something temporarily where you're building on top of the trailer, which I can't understand what that would be, you're not, and unless it's a small shed, maybe you might build a small shed on top of a trailer. But a tiny house, and especially a tiny house of this size, you're building so that it is integrated within that trailer. And so to take it to a location, and to the most that you would do to convert it to an ADU is possibly take off the wheels and put it on piers, or put it on a slab of concrete, but you would still keep the bottom of that trailer, and then um, kind of like the tie down process that I've talked to about securing the tiny house, so securing that tiny house into a concrete slab, but you would not be removing that trailer. Um, let's see. So that is to the answer to that question. And I see there's a different answer in the chat about moving it, um, that I'm not familiar with for a tiny house of this size, and so I'm not going to address that. Um, Absolutely. Okay, then I got 15 minutes and I need to move through this. Let's see. Mom of adult children with grandchildren, I think they understand my desire to become a nomad, but saying something is easier said than done. How did your family adjust? It wasn't optional. I mean, this is, and I talk about dreams. Maybe I'll add that video over here. Like this was my dream, and especially if you've got adult children, like the adjustment, that's on them. This at some point you get to live your life, and so that is, um, they'll be okay. Um, is basically how I feel. Do you have any plans to renovate your small RV anytime soon? It's on my to-do list. I should put funding is my challenge. Funding and finding somebody to actually do the work. So it is still um, to be done in something I want to do. Let's see. All right, I think I've answered all the questions. So I don't want to hold you all long today. All right, so this was the build as it started happening. This was moving it the first time. This is the location when I was out at the RV park. There were actually RVs all around my house, but we kind of cropped them out of the picture here. Um, I was only here for 6 months. I encountered some racism and moved out of there as quickly as possible. But um, I don't think I intended to live there full time anyway. But that did expedite my move. This is I was in the backyard of a home in 3 miles from downtown Charlotte. The house that I was behind was to the right. If you're looking at this picture, the house was to the right of me. This is also, I had painted the house. So it is the same house. I painted it black. I really wanted my house to be darker when I initially built it. So I had done that. Um, I totally skipped the location because after I left let me see if I have a picture of that. After I left the RV park, what is happening here? After I left the RV park, I was at another location. I think I have a picture of that later. Anyway, let me go back. This is also when I had taken off the Juliet balcony and extended the porch. So the porch at this point was like 10 feet long, and that was the first extension of my of the tiny house. Oh, thank you, Sandra. You're always something. Let me say that. Let me drop this in here because I am doing some labor, aren't I? So I always say, feel free to share the love, and I'm gonna drop it in the chat to show you how. Thank you, Sandra. You always get it kicked off, and I appreciate you. Um, Thank you, Angela. I appreciate you. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so let me change from this one because I've got some more pictures to show. Okay, so sorry, y'all. This isn't organized in my organized fashion because I wasn't necessarily planning to do this. I did have a guest this morning. So I completely skipped the picture to show you um, the location I went to after. Thank you. After the RV park. Um, this was at the location I just showed you in the backyard. As you can see, there were some houses behind me, but this is that screened-in porch that I just showed you. This was the work that went into removing that Juliet balcony and extending that screened-in porch. And I removed the Juliet balcony. If you'll look at the roof line here, and this is the same roofing for my screened-in porch that I have now. I use this polycarbonate material because I want to be able to have light come in. And so this polycarbonate cannot hold weight. And so that is why I removed the Juliet balcony. And I really didn't use the Juliet balcony a lot. So that I could use this polycarbonate for the roofing for the porch. And so this was that porch at that location. All right, let's see. And then I didn't go through these pictures, so bear with me. Uh, these are current pictures. And so let's see. This is what the house looks like now. This is the new location, and I kind of skipped I skipped a couple of locations, but again, this is last minute As you can see, this is the original tiny house in the back. Let me see if I have another picture. I might change. Okay, so tiny house in the back. Um, it is still on wheels, but what I've done is at this location, I built, if you can think of it, kind of like an inverted L. So the screened-in porch here to the right, to the left is a sunroom, and this sunroom is like an L that wraps on the back side of the tiny house. So where I originally had that 10-foot porch that I extended, the sunroom starts like that, and that's the space that I'm sitting in right now. And then it wraps around the house and extends to a screened-in porch. This part is the part that I said is built on piers, kind of like a deck. It is not movable. It's not built on a trailer, so it's not movable. If I wanted to move the tiny house, I could detach this through effort from the tiny house and still pull the tiny house out. But that would mean I would lose all of the work that has gone into this build. And so I would not, I have no plans to do that. Um, Let me think what else. It seems like that there's some pictures that I could have, let me find another. Um, so now y'all will see all of my, um, all right, y'all bear with me. Let's see if I can find some pictures. There's a lot of pictures, right? All right, so this was a couple of years ago. I painted the exterior. I took out the red around the windows, but I was trying to see if I could show you a better picture of the exterior. This kind of shows you. Okay, so I hope you can compare this. So if you compare this picture to this picture. So this was 2018 when I first moved out here, and I just built the sunroom. And so you can see this is where I say it's like the inverted L. And so it is um, wrapped around on the side of the house, and then it comes out to the front. And then within the last couple of years, I screened in that porch across the front. Let's see. You're very welcome. Let's see. Um, if I have some more questions. Oh, thank you. I love my house in black too. Here's a question, Joe. I see you hang lots of things on your walls. How do you ensure you are not hitting any wires behind the walls? So, my exterior walls where wiring actually is, um, my exterior walls are thick enough. The wiring, they're thick enough so they've got insulation behind that paneling. They've got framing. The wires, the plumbing, and the electrical wires are within the framing, and so it's far enough back that I would not be able to hit the electrical wiring. It's not as the framing, no, it's standard framing. So it's if you think about like a traditional wall in a home, it is, if it's not exactly the same, it's very similar to that. So there's the frame, the wiring and the plumbing is a lot further back, so I wouldn't be able to hit it. I only use the cabinet grade plywood on the interior. So the closet, where I mentioned not using walls, it was only for interior stuff that's not load bearing. So the walls for my closet, the walls for my bathroom, and they don't have any wiring in them at all. Did you take home improvement courses prior to building? I've never owned any home before. I did not. But there are always the courses like at the community colleges, volunteering with the organizations that do home building that you could get involved with to get some experience. I did not. I have no type of expertise in that at all. This is was more of me researching the part, and I did not do any of the physical building myself. I can design it, but I can't physically build it myself. So I have to hire contractors. Thank you so much. Let's see what else. Thank you. Let's see. So I showed you all that was the old porch. Um, what else can I show you? I'll show y'all interior. I think most of y'all know what the interior looks like of my house. My decor has changed over the years. One of the things that I love about my house is that a lot of my decor is um, stuff that I've had. As I said, the house that I had, the 4 bedroom, 3 bath house, a lot of my decor is from that house or homes that I've had previously. And that was part of me including that so that it always remains home. Like I didn't want to be in a completely new space and not have parts of what made home for me. So, for example, Mandela, this is the guy that's sitting here at my front door. Mandela has been at my door since my home. I think he's been at my door since 1998. So he's always in my space at my door. And the same like for this African drum that's up at the top. A lot of my decor is from previous homes. Um, Again, so this is the interior now for the most part. My overhead, that loft is my overhead sleeping loft. On the left hand side is my kitchen. Right hand side is the closet. This is going through to the sunroom space I'm in. Sorry, y'all. This is just a, um, a collection of photos. My bathroom is a little bit changed now because I have a small storage unit that I put out in the backyard, and I bought a stackable washer dryer combo deal, and so I've taken out. I had a combo 1 unit that did washing and drying, which worked fine. It just takes longer. And I decided since I was buying that storage shed, I bought a regular apartment size stackable unit and took this out. There's a question. Oh, is that a fireplace? So it is actually a heater that has the faux fireplace, but it does do heating. I never actually use it for heating. I use it for the ambiance. Um, but yes, it is a faux fireplace. I have a full bathroom. Again, knowing what you want to have in your space, you absolutely can have a bathtub in your tiny house. I do have a bathtub. I'm not going to take y'all through that entire photo album. I actually think that's the end of it. Uh, let's see. This is current. Thank you very much. Um, that is I don't have formal design training, so let me clarify that. The stuff that I do is my girlfriend told me yesterday it is a gift, and I need to own my gift. So thank you. It is just something that I do because I love. I love decor. Well, certain styles of decor, I guess I should say. All right, let me see if there's something in here that I can share with you all. Um, uh, this photo album is a new shoot that I just did for an upcoming feature that I'm excited about that I haven't announced yet. But this is, oh, so this is the screened in porch that I have now. And you can see again, I used that same polycarbonate overhead that I used on my smaller porch. Um, I saw you saying you love my um, doors, the screen doors for the front of the porch. I love this door too. I bought one for the side of the sunroom space I'm in, and um, I ended up going back to buy two more because my original doors ended up getting the sun hits really hard here and they were getting warped, and so I used it as an opportunity to replace the doors. Um, let's see, what else can I show y'all? I think that's it in this. That kind of gives you a better idea of how that add-on is attached to the house. You can kind of see it is like a backward L. All right, let me stop sharing this and I'm gonna see if there's some questions I can answer in the chat. Thank you very much. Do you have plans you sell for the porch and sunroom additions? No. The plans I sell are only for the tiny house. Sorry, Sandra. The tiny house only. Like the plans don't include any of the porches that I've added onto the house that have they those have just kind of been things that I added on that I wanted. But my plans that I sell are just for the tiny house. Let's see. What other questions can I ask? We're going to need a new house tour, including the shed and outdoor space. Okay, I'll have to work on that. Um, that's funny. There's going to be a tour that I do with my iPhone. Those tours are not inexpensive. Um, the design of your tiny home and the two additions is very interesting. It almost looks as if you have a small home cabin. I'm seeing the same concept with the incredible tiny homes. Thank you. So, square footage, my tiny house is now right about I think it is 474 square feet. And when you're calculating square footage of a house, you don't include space that is not livable. So the screened-in porch doesn't get counted into that, but counting the sunroom space and the original tiny house is about 474, I believe. My intention at some point is, as I'm thinking through living in my tiny house, as I get older, I imagine that this sunroom space will become my bedroom and I won't continue to use the overhead loft. I can't imagine a time that I can't climb those stairs, but I guess at some point that'll happen. And so I that is my plan. Oh, thank you. You do need to own that gift. You do have a talent for decorating, Angel. No, I have won enough awards for my craft. Thank you. I am working on owning my gifts. That is an uncomfortable space for me. But thank you. I'm working on it. It is. I just had this conversation yesterday. Yes, thank you, Angela. I promise you, I'm trying to work on it. Um, Are you open to provide your services to assist in designing a tiny house? Absolutely. The consulting that I do, absolutely. I will share links, and there'll be links in the video description to connect with me. That is absolutely one of my loves. Um, and let me share my link to my plans too. I'm making a note because I'll forget all of this. Um, older, you're still a teenager. Hilarious. Hilarious. But thank you for that kind word. Question: would you recommend the company who built your home? It's hard to decide who to go with. I'm looking at Incredible Tiny Homes. I worked with a general contractor to build my home, and no is my answer to that. I don't recommend that, and that's the end of that. I don't want to. No, um, I had the benefit of being able to be on site all day, every day for my build. And that led to the success of my build. I've heard good things about Incredible Tiny Homes. I know Regina, who was one of my guests on the conversation series. She built with Incredible Tiny Homes, and I know she was also involved in the building process, and she talks about that. I'll link to her interview in the video description, but she speaks highly of Incredible Tiny Homes. All right, what else? Let me see. I think I've answered all of the questions. Thank you all very much for the super chat love. I appreciate y'all. I apologize that this wasn't as an organized conversation. This was last minute trying to figure out what to do, and I don't think I've spoken and shared pictures or talk through my process, and maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do that better next time. Let's see. Do you have a tiny house listing for your area with a gallery? Oh, that's not for me. Okay. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat um, about anything that I've shared. So I think I think you all have had enough of this conversation. Great, thank you. I can't wait to see more of your videos. Well, thank you very much. I am excited that my home is going to be featured in one of my favorite spaces soon, and I'll be happy to share that. And I'll also, if you haven't seen oh, you did have a question. I'm sorry, I totally missed that. On your straps, were they hurricane straps? I'm gathering that the welded bolts were not even an option at the time. What straps are we talking about? Let me go back and look at your question and see if I can understand what straps you're talking about. Exterior straps. I think you're talking about um, attaching the framing build to the tiny house trailer. Um, I think that's what you're talking about. And hurricane straps, yes. Those, I cannot think of the company that builds all of the pieces that we use to attach the tiny house to the trailer because they're like some key pieces. So attaching the tiny house to the trailer and then attaching the roof to the tiny house. Um, I cannot think of the name of the company that manufactures most of those pieces, and I'll try to think of and include them in the um, video description. But that very expensive pieces, like each one of those pieces, I think were no less than like $20 an actual piece. But they build that specific material. Yes, okay, so I was right. The home to the trailer. This company builds, as I understand it, they build a lot of the I can't think of a professional word for like bridges, for structural integrity. That is like what they do. And so we used a lot of their materials, their products in the build, because when a house is moving, I've heard people liking it to a hurricane and a tornado happening at the same time as the house is moving. And so you want the structural integrity and attaching the house to the trailer, if it's going to be moving, is key to the process. And so Simpson, that's exactly who it was. Thank you. That is exactly who it is. Um, I was going to get to it at some point. Their stuff is not cheap, but it's good. And they make all kinds of products for specifically for that. So they have stuff for roofing, and they had stuff that we use for um, attaching the framing, building the framing into the trailer. So it is the framing is bolted into the trailer, and then there were different straps that we use to continue framing up and attaching the framing to the trailer using that strapping. So it is Simpson, and they're again not cheap, but they're worth it. All right. Um, Here's a question. My county allows tiny houses on foundation. Do you think a foundation with the tie downs embedded would suffice for this rule, or even building the home directly on a foundation? No, it's going to have to be directly on foundation. So Charlotte, the city that I got kicked out of with my tiny house on wheels, they allow tiny houses on foundation as well. But when they say that, they mean building just like you would a traditional home on foundation and going through their permitting processes. The only difference is that you're building a smaller size home, but you would be then going through their same process. So that is the option. It is not the same as using a tiny house builder or building on a trailer and then um, attaching that trailer to concrete or to a foundation. That won't be allowed. Have you written a book? If so, I would love to buy it. Angela, that is on the top of my to-do list, and it is part of me owning my gifts and getting the work done. I have a block in that I've not worked on that. I can work on everything for everybody else. I just don't work on my own stuff very well. And so it's coming. I promise it's coming. I have to sit with myself and get my life together this week so that I can get done the things that I need to do to walk into my gift. And this is something that I'm struggling with, but I have to do it. So thank you for the boost and reminder. And yeah, um, let's see. Thank you. I think that's it. All right. I don't see any other questions that I can answer. I see some comments. I thank y'all for showing up for me on Sundays. Um, I appreciate you all. I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing, and I feel like these Sunday conversations are part of what I'm supposed to be doing, and I just need to figure out how they're supposed to be done and what I'm supposed to be doing. So, thank y'all for allowing me. Oh, congratulations. Congratulations. I know. I got to write the book. Don't make me cry, Angela. All right. Before Angela makes me cry, I am going to call it. I don't think I see any other questions. Um, I'm getting myself together. I'm getting myself together, I promise. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. I appreciate you all. All right. Um, let's see. Let me do this the way I know I'm supposed to do. So let's see. All right. I am going to close this out. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was impromptu, so I'm glad you all think it was wonderful because I was flying by the seat of my pants. But I thank y'all for allowing me to, and thank you for being here. Okay, y'all. Okay, y'all. Y'all probably don't know that I will cry. So thank you for the love. Okay, I'm not crying with y'all today, but thank you. I'm gonna get it together. I am crying. Hmm. Okay, y'all got me. Thank you, Randolph. I appreciate you for being here. All right. I promise. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank y'all for being here. All right, I'm closing now before y'all get me. Thank you. All right, y'all got me today. Again, this has been the conversation series. This has been an impromptu version of it. My guest was sick, so hopefully we'll have her back soon, and we can. Okay, all right, we can get to interviewing some guests. I thank y'all. Um, okay, thank you. I was trying really hard not to cry. Thank y'all. All right, y'all got me. Thank you. Thank y'all for supporting. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the encouragement. I appreciate y'all so much. Yes, Angela. Um, if this video was helpful, please feel free to share it, subscribe to the channel, do all of those things. And I will see you all next Sunday. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Happy Sunday, y'all. Thank you.